The business is not you. The business is a totally separate entity from you. And every business must be structured from day one to survive you. When you're self-aware as a leader, expect that your organization can fail at any time. How do I bring tension into this business so that people realize the only way to survive is to do the right thing and make sure that this business starts to grow?
What will be your message to business leaders who are bureaucratic and feel like everything starts and stops with them?
Bureaucracy is the poison pill that kills businesses. My personal strategy is this. I don't care whether you are the best in that organization. If you are slowing down my process, I will remove you. Gen Z, Gen X, Gen Alpha, and so on and so forth. And those different generations, what is it that they hold importance? As a leader, you've got to know that.
In business, we often talk about scaling as if it is just a matter of adding more resources or more people. But anybody who has actually been in the driver's seat knows that scaling a business in volatile markets is more like trying to tune an engine while the car is speeding down a motorway. And that is because it requires a level of operational discipline that most people never truly master. And today we are joined by somebody who has lived that reality at the highest level. Ayobiyi Shote has spent over 30 years at the forefront of the energy industry. During his time as Vice President and Managing Director at Baker Hughes for West and Central Africa, he oversaw a revenue jump from $250 million to $700 million and nearly doubled operating profits. Currently, he serves as the CEO of BVI Consult and Chairman of the board at AMW Petroleum Development Company. What also makes Ayobiyi unique is how he blends this high-stakes corporate strategy with his work as a pastor. He brings a perspective on leadership that integrates professional excellence with personal character and spirituality. Ayobiyi, it is a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
This interview has taken close to a year now. We've been planning to have this interview. Ayo is quite a busy person, but I'm happy to have this call with him where we can speak about operational excellence and everything about leadership as businesses scale and how leaders can drive performance. So thank you so much. I'm going to start right from the beginning of your 30-year journey.
Yeah.
I mean, to get to the C-suite, you don't just arrive. It doesn't just happen that all of a sudden you become a leader. You have to build yourself into that person. So looking back, what were the specific skills that you had to sharpen and what were the sacrifices you had to make to reach that level of leadership?
Thanks, Bukola. I think the journey started from a point of actually realization. When a lot of us start, we basically are just focused on survival. Right? I need to get a job. I need to make money. I need to take care of my family. And I was on this train. Then I realized that I needed to start to develop myself. So part of that was I started to read. Then I was living in Port Harcourt and working in Port Harcourt for Baker Hughes then. And then I started to read business books. And about the same time, I also decided I was going to start my entrepreneurial journey. So I started to work on building a bakery. Now, the way I went about the bakery was very strange because I decided I was going to plan everything myself, which I did. I planned the structure. In those days, if you want to build a bakery, you just build a temporary structure. I didn't build a temporary structure. I built a brick structure, which to most people was silly, right? But it taught me about structure. It taught me about process. So about the time I finished the bakery and I started to run it, I realized that I did not have some skills, that financial management was critical, understanding my market was important, that operations management was critical. And that, combined with what I was doing when I was reading books, basically then set me on this journey of trying to understand what it means to get into the C-suite. Now, so one of the books I read was written by a guy called Jim Collins, Good to Great. And when I was reading Good to Great, something struck me. Now, for those that have read it, the background is in the US, right? The background is about companies on the New York Stock Exchange. Mm-hmm. But something struck me when I started looking at all those companies. The CEOs were either lawyers or accountants. And some of these companies were engineering companies. Lawyers, accountants, no engineers. And my background is mechanical engineering. So I started asking myself a question. Why is it that lawyers and accountants of finance people get to run organizations as CEOs, and engineers or doctors are not doing the same thing either for engineering companies or for clinics, hospitals, or medical companies. So that's launched me into this journey of trying to understand what it means to be a CEO. Now, one of the things I did was I sat down and I gave myself a target. I gave myself a 10-year plan that in 10 years, I will become the vice president for Baker Hughes in Nigeria. About the same time, I put that down. And then I said it while I was reading Good to Great, and I also read Built to Last. I then started to distill competencies and skills. So some of the CEOs that were showcased in those books had. So I made a list. And then I looked at where I was at that time. I was an applications engineer developing programs and drillbit designs for client applications in the Nigerian oil and gas business. And then I listed all my own skills.
Yes.
And then I saw the gaps. So as an engineer, you're focused on the present. You're focused on what works. You're focused on principles. To be a C-suite practitioner, you need to have strategic agility. You need to be able to craft a future that is not evident. You need to be able to communicate that future to people. You need to be able to look at numbers, financial numbers, and understand what the numbers mean, and then roll those numbers and their implications back into the operations. It then became clear to me that if I was going to get into the C-suite, I need to develop the skill sets. And what was the fastest way to develop the skill sets? I need to get an MBA.
Yeah.
So I then decided, you know what? I need to get an MBA, but I needed an MBA that will force me to think and be able to practice what I learned. So I started looking for an MBA with a UK or a US university. And I was lucky I got one, the University of Liverpool. I was in Nigeria. I could not get out of my job and leave. So I opted to do an online MBA. And this was when online MBAs was still new, right? But I was lucky I got accepted. And my company then, Baker Hughes, actually paid for it. And it was the best 2 years of my life, if I can say that, because one of the first things I learned instantly was for me to be a C-suite guy, I should start thinking of working on the business rather than working in the business. Because if I'm working in the business, I get sucked in. When I'm working on the business, I get a bird's eye view. I see the way the different functions and departments work together. And then I see very early what I need to do as a leader to ensure that every function brings its best to the table and how to mitigate the weaknesses of each function. Because in life, you have strengths and you have development areas. I call them development areas, not weaknesses, but they're basically weaknesses, right? And the only way you move forward is that you continue to build on your strengths and you use your strengths to mitigate the effect of your weaknesses, while you can try to move your weaknesses to the position of strength. So that's how my journey started.
I think we can just close right now because you've already given us a masterclass on leadership from this. I mean, it started with survival, which is very relatable. But what I could get from your journey is self-awareness. And some people struggle with that today. Self-awareness is what would help you to discover what your improvement areas, as you said, are, your areas of strength, and the need to upskill. You saw that having started your bakery business, these are the areas that you may be lacking. And then you started to read books, and those books broadened your mind. And then you gave yourself a target. And I think that's another, key area that we need to start to practice. But then it's not even enough to give yourself a target. You need to hold yourself accountable. So thank you so much for sharing that. We're going to move on now to business growth side of things. You have been working for over 30 years. You have seen the areas where businesses struggle, and many businesses, they grow their revenue, but with time they lose that efficiency in the process. It's easy to be efficient when your business is still small. It's easy to be customer centric. It's easy to have a great culture. But how do you, build a system that ensures that a company gets better even as it grows bigger, rather than, becoming bureaucratic?
Okay. I think the last word that you used is where we need to start from.
Okay.
Bureaucracy is the poison pill that kills businesses. Now, bureaucracy is essential, but it's dependent on how you craft the process and the structure. So what is bureaucracy? Bureaucracy in the simplest form basically is, this is the way we do things. For you to go to D, you must pass through A, B, C, D. If A, B, C do not have accountability, they will slow down the process because they need to show that they're important in the system, right? And then when they slow down the process, everything downstream from wherever they are will suffer. You do not drive accountability of everybody within that process, then the bigger the organization gets, the slower it becomes. And that's why it gets to a point that massive organizations that we think are too big to fail ultimately fail. There are two things a leader needs to do. The two primary things, in my opinion. When you're self-aware as a leader, you've got to expect that your organization can fail at any time. So if you stepped into the organization that is already structured in a specific way, right? What you need to think about is, how do I bring tension? A lot of people don't like that word tension, but for businesses, it works, right? How do I bring tension into this business so that people realize that the only way to survive is to do the right thing and make sure that this business starts to grow? You build a framework around that. That framework includes communication. To the people working in this organization at the very lowest level, do they know the impact of what they are doing to the survival of this business? So most leaders will do town hall meetings. They will do newsletters from the desk of the CEO and so on and so forth. What I do as part of that process is, if you are a team lead, I coach you to see that team as your own business. You are the CEO of that team. I, that am your CEO or your immediate supervisor, I'm a member of the board of directors. So whatever you're doing to convince me that you want to do something in that team, you've got to see it from the perspective of, I am talking to my board of directors. Now, why did I start doing that? I learned this, I think, when I was in the Middle East in Oman. When I was in Oman, I was working for Baker Hughes. I was country director for Oman, Yemen, and Pakistan. Because when organizations send you out of your own country to another country in a leadership role, it's basically a development position. What organizations are trying to do is they're trying to teach you cultural intelligence so that your cultural quotient can improve, right? They're trying to teach you emotional intelligence. Because if your emotional intelligence is not high, you cannot be culturally intelligent, right? So I needed to understand the different nationalities I was working with, the way they will go about things. And it became clear to me that if I'm going to develop a system that speaks to different nationalities, but I get the same result, I need to let them see how important they are to the organization. Because everybody wants to know how important they are. So that way, when I'm talking to a team lead, I'm asking them questions as if the accountability remains with them for that team to succeed. They know they need to come to me to get approval. They know they need to come to my team, whoever is within their line of reporting, to get approval. But when they're going to get the approval, because they're seeing that team as their business, the way they've put together their proposal, they've thought about everything. They've thought about what could go wrong if we do this, what could go wrong if we go to option B. What are the mitigating things we need to do? That way, that conversation becomes richer. Now, when I started, it was tough because people did not understand where I was coming from.
Of course not.
You see, culturally, we all go to the leader and offload our problems on him because we think that because he's the leader, he's the only one that has the answers, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of leaders think that, oh, that's because they value my knowledge. I don't like that because it kills leaders quickly. So when you come to me and you then tell me, we have this problem, I listen to you. We have this problem. This is what has gone wrong. This is what has gone wrong. And my first question to you is, what do you think we can do about it? Right? The natural response for most of us is we start to solution it. Why don't you do this? Have you done this? Have you done? No. If you do that, the people downstream from you will not grow. They will not learn. They will not develop the sense of accountability that they need to develop. But when you ask the question, what do you think we can do about it? People are initially taken aback because I came to you because I have a problem. But you see, the question basically is trying to create a sense of, you know something. I need to know what you know. It's trying to create a sense of, you've got skin in the game. I need to see the skin. It's got to create a sense of, I value your opinion. Even if I don't accept it, I value it. So when the person then says, okay, I think we can do 1, 2, 3, 4, then we then discuss the pros and cons of each option based on my knowledge, based on my position as a lead, based on the fact that I might know a little bit more than you, based on the fact that I might have information that you're not privy to. I share that part of the information, and then we develop an action plan. And then I say, fine, go execute, right? When you do that at every level, every team pulls together. Now, part of that conversation is you've got to let them see how what they are doing fits into the input for the next team downstream. Everybody has got to see that. For me, that's communication. When people see that, they will learn to work. The other part of that is, even when you have done that, there will still be some people in your organization that are just reactionary. They don't want it to work
Yes.
because they want to step in place. My personal strategy is this. I don't care whether you are the best in that organization. If you are slowing down my process, I will remove you. Because it's about the business.
Yes, it's about the business. And this strategy, it's great.
Yeah.
But I have also seen where even the owners of businesses, sometimes they feel threatened by their
Yes.
own employees.
Yes.
I've had situations where some people will tell me my boss is threatened by me or by
Mhm.
somebody else who is maybe a line manager because he feels that person is taking away clients or is going to run away with something. What will be your message to business leaders who are very bureaucratic and feel like everything starts and stops with them?
Okay. I'm a coach,
Okay.
right? I coach business owners and I coach employees also. The first thing I do when I talk to business owners that feel that way is I paint the scenario that if they drop dead today, what happens to their business? That's the first thing. They've got to see that, right? The business is not you. The business is a totally separate entity from you. And every business must be structured from day one to survive you, right? That's basically what corporate governance means.
Yes.
Corporate governance basically means what have you set up to ensure that this business runs, whether you're there or not, to ensure that all stakeholders, including employees, the government, everybody, are taken care of within the structure of this business. That's what corporate governance is. So most leaders, when they start from a perspective of this business is me, it is mine, I set it up. And when they have that mindset, then they basically become the stumbling block. Now, John Maxwell, in one of his books, talks about the law of the lead. The law of the lead basically means team cannot grow higher than where you are as a leader because you are the lead. So every owner must not see that business that they have started as an achievement. They must see it as a responsibility. Then they must continually grow to ensure that they benefit that business as they grow. And the more they grow and they learn more, the more they will see the imperfections in their business. That's one element of it. The second element of it is we've got to understand who we are as human beings. And as human beings, a lot of us do not want to be overshadowed, and a lot of us do not want another person to outshine us. As human beings, we are naturally competitive, and we've got to understand that. So elements of psychological safety then comes in. As a leader, I've got to let people below me know that I value their opinion. In actual fact, let me put it this other way so that you understand.
Okay.
When I was working for Baker Hughes, every new assignment I go to, if I'm the leader in that area, my very first team meeting is I tell everybody in the room, guys, I am not the smartest in the room. I am not. And it's the truth. Because you are the leader does not mean you're the smartest in the room. You've got to tell people that because you're the owner of the business does not mean that you're the smartest in the room. And why did you employ them in the first place? Because you want to pay for the expertise, you want to pay for the experience, you want to pay for their knowledge. And if you're paying for that, you must learn to listen to them. Now, when I put myself in that place of vulnerability, the people then realize, okay, this guy is willing to listen. Right? So that way I listen. Even if I do not agree with them, I still listen. And if I'm then going to disagree, I make sure that the points I present, even if it's not clear to them, are points that we can discuss. So the next elephant in the room then is a lot of leaders believe when they do that, their authority will be challenged. So they don't want to do that.
Right.
But yes, your authority will be challenged because suddenly people will think that, oh, you don't know anything, I need to coach you. But the buck stops at your table as a leader. So the final decision is still yours to take. So you must have that level of emotional intelligence to know when to say, fine, I've listened to you, I've taken your points on, I've looked at 1, 2, 3, because of 3, 4, 5, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do A, B, C. So go execute. And that is what it means to be a leader. That's what it means to sit in the C-suite. That courage to say, I've taken every input and we're going to go in this direction. And if it works, the team is excellent. If it doesn't work, it's my responsibility, right? And that's why leadership, for me, is a core competence. It's not a soft skill. You must train yourself to be the proper leader that your situation, your country, your business wants to see?
That's a good place to start when you ask those kind of leaders. If you drop dead today, what happens to the business? And being able to distinguish an individual from a company is very important. But most people see it as it's them. It's their baby. It starts and it ends with them. I like that you ended with leadership. I want us to tackle that for a bit. There's this debate about leadership, and some people would say, I was born a leader. It's in it. It's in me. It's just how I'm a natural born leader. Some people say that this is something that you need to develop the skills. What is your own opinion on leadership? Is it innate or is it a skill that requires development?
Leaders are not born, they are made. However, let's go back to the family unit.
Okay.
And this is conjecture on my side based on what I've seen, what I've studied, what I've learned over the years. So that if your listeners do not agree with me, they should not think that I'm quoting statistics somewhere. But I've seen that when children are born into homes where their parents are not natural leaders, where their parents are not in leadership roles and have not grown to be leaders, those children most times tend not to be leaders. But children that are born into homes where the parents are rich, the parents are used to their word being taken as law, the parents are used to determining the direction a big group of people, politicians, business people, entrepreneurs, high network people, children that are born into those homes, the bulk of them end up becoming leaders. So when you look at those children in the second group, we can tend to think that they are born leaders. It's because they have been trained, they have been molded, they have been programmed, if I can use that word, to be people that you would expect that their words is taken as law. And I believe that's where that statement comes, that leaders are born and not made. However, for the two groups, you have quite a lot of outliers, right? So let's take a child that was born in a family where the parents are not leaders. They are not in leadership roles. They spent all their productive life taking orders from other people, right? And they also do not have the knowledge of developing their own children to not to grow up the way they've grown up. Because see, at home, your conversations is defined by who you are, by your circumstances, and your children are listening to you. Right? You cannot be behaving in a particular way and expect them to behave in a totally different way. Right? And that's why for parents, if you want your children to become political leaders in future, you start from home. You start to let them see why it is important for them to aspire for this position. Those conversations must go in that direction. But let's take a child that grew up in that kind of home that no direction towards becoming a leader, right? And then something catastrophic happens. Maybe the breadwinner passes away and that child is thrust into the streets. Maybe in the Western world, you will not have that kind of situation because the social system is strong. They'll put a child in a foster home and so on. But let's look at Africa, where in most cases that child is thrust into the streets and that child then has to fend for himself. Is then thrust into a structure where the strong eats the weak. What do you think that child will do? Is it that the child will remain weak and be eaten up and remains a follower of his life, or it will strive to become different? So let's assume that the child then gets to mid-level. Is not 100% strong, but he's also not 100% weak. And then you take that child out of that environment and then go and trust the child in an environment where you're not under pressure to do anything, but your strength will show if you apply the strength. What do you think will happen to that child? That child suddenly is stronger than people in that new environment now, wants to show that I need to survive. Yes. And guess what? The child will be seen as a leader. The leader has been made, right? Now, let's move on from the family level now. Let's go into education. Personally, and this is my personal opinion, I've educated my children all over the world. And I think I've studied what I've seen. Personally, our educational system as a whole, when I say as a whole, globally, is not designed to produce leaders. Now, there are still outliers in there. There are specific schools that if you can afford to go, the way you are trained is different.
Yes.
Right? But the bulk of what is out there does not design. When we go through that educational system, we go through it so that we can live, get a job, and survive. And how will you know? Today, if you do a research of billionaires today, globally, a lot of them either are on the spectrum, autism spectrum, or they have one learning challenge or the other. We call it a challenge. It's just that they learn differently. And because they learn differently, they don't fit in into the educational structure that we have.
Yes.
So we kind of label them as difficult. I see in the developing world, I see that tragedy happen every time. So when you look at the people that have been thrust into trades, thrust onto the streets, it's because they did not fit it into that structure, because they learn differently. The attention that they need focused on them so that they can learn at their own pace, or learn in a totally different format is not there. So they are thrust out, right? So the bulk of people that then pass through the university system and then become graduates, they've got to go look for a job. So they step into the labor market with that same mindset. And that's when you then see people work for 30 years and they've done the same job for 30 years. No promotion, and they're happy with it. Why? They're not leaders. They've been trained to be followers all their life, and they're followers all their life, right? So for you to then become a leader at whatever level, because your leaders at different levels, you've got to read that place of self-awareness to say, this is not enough for me. I want to do more. And then you start to develop yourself. Now, when you start to do that, you will stick out like a sore thumb. Pause. I think there's an experiment I read. It was a psychologically based experiment where I think monkeys were put in a room, and I think they put a bunch of bananas on a pole. And every time the monkeys would try to climb that pole, I think there was an electric shock somewhere that would shock the monkey, and then the monkey will fall. So after some time, all the monkeys in the room then associated pain with trying to get that banana, the bunch of bananas on the pole, right? And then after some time, they removed half of the monkeys and brought in a new set. So you had half monkeys that are used to that experience of pain, a new set that were not used to that experience of pain. And what I read that they then realized was, when the new monkeys now attempt to go for the bananas, it's the ones that are used to the pain that will pull down these monkeys and basically beat them.
Wow.
So when you decide that you want to grow as a leader, most times you will stick out like a sore thumb, because other people are saying, who do you think you are?
Do you think you are?
So your resilience, your sense of purpose, your determination to become a leader then must be strong. And that's why I think leaders are made. They are not born. Because I've also seen people born into those fantastic homes where they're supposed to be leaders, and they are weaklings and they can never be a leader. Right? Those are the outliers I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So to be a leader, you've got to develop yourself. That's why I personally think leadership is a core competence that must be developed.
Well grounded. And I'm just going to speak on the back of self-development, which is your response to that question. In 2026 now, we're seeing that organizations are advancing their technological capabilities to drive efficiency, right? And they're doing that to also increase profitability. But you would agree with me that there are also non-technical skills that are equally in demand. What are the human-only leadership traits that will become even more valuable for keeping workforce performing optimally, especially as systems become more automated?
Emotional intelligence. How do you connect with your people? How do you connect with your people? Do your people see
human connection?
Yes. Do they see you as somebody that is only focused on the outcomes? Outcomes are important. Outcomes is a lifeblood of businesses, right? But how do you connect with them? The kind of conversations you have, does it show that you value them as human beings or you value them as a resource? Because they're two different things, right? Number two is your understanding of even events going around in your society. How do you factor that back into your workforce, right? Now, let's look at it this way. The younger generation, and I have three young ones. My youngest is going to be 20 next week, and there's a one that is 24, and then there's a 26-year-old. And sometimes when I listen to them talk about the organizations where they work and the way they push back sometimes when seemingly unreasonable requests comes from their supervisors, I cringe. And I cringe from the fact that when I was at their age, we could not do that. So one thing you must do as a leader is you must understand the workforce working for me, Gen Z, Gen X, Gen Alpha, and so on and so forth. And those different generations, what is it that they hold important? As a leader, you've got to know that. Because the only way you can actually connect with them is connecting with them from what they hold as important. It might not make sense to you. try to learn it. So the next thing as a leader is that the ability to learn is critical. My saying it's not important is critical. When you sit down with a 20-year-old and you try to learn, you try to understand what makes them a 20-year-old. How do they see the world that they live in? How do they see the social construct of the society? What is it that worries them? As you do that, right, you will understand them as human beings. You will understand how they fit into your organization. You will understand when they are not working to the best of their ability. And then take that, apply to the efficiency driven by artificial intelligence. You have an organization that is living, but is also delivering on outcomes. Now, when I say some of these things, I always like to try to answer the pushback even before the pushback comes. A lot of people will not want to do this, even as leaders, because the emotional investment is high, right?
Yeah.
But truly, if you want to be effective as a leader, now, effectiveness as a leader is not only in the results that the organization or the team that you lead provides, it's also in the way the people that have worked with you feel that you have impacted their lives. For me, that is effectiveness. I left Baker Hughes 10 years ago. I still know people in Baker Hughes today that will call me and tell me, you changed my life. When I hear that, it tells me that within that time of my life, I was effective as a leader, right? So that's the way I drive it. That's very important.
That is such a great response. And for a leader like yourself in the energy sector, in my own opinion, I think the energy sector is a challenging industry to work in because of the volatility and everything that is involved in that. And I want to talk about performance management, right? So you're leading in that industry where external factors can just change overnight. We've seen how, the flux of oil prices can change situations for a business. We on the outside, we're experiencing something different, but on the inside, you would have more experience to what it does to employees and also the business leaders. How are you able to keep your team focused on their KPIs when the world outside is in that constant state of, fluctuation?
All right. So the first thing I tell the team, and this I've experienced this before, so maybe I will lean back on some of the experiences I've had. The
Okay.
first thing I tell the team is what we do on a daily basis is still important, right? No matter how turbulent the industry is because of all the things that are moving prices up or down, most times it's fantastic for the industry
Mm-hmm.
because we're chasing the money, more drilling is done, more energy is generated, we're recruiting people. It's when it crashes that is critical, right? Because when it crashes, the shareholders are focused on how do we limit our losses and cut costs. And the fastest way to cut costs is actually people, unfortunately. So everybody must know that irrespective of what happens, the business will still go on. So this is the structure. Most times when you hit that stage where oil price is low,
Yes.
and you want to get rid of people, most organizations will first look at the low performance from the previous year,
Okay.
right? And they're the first ones that they get out of the business. Now, personally, what I do is the moment I have that list and we have decided they're going to leave, I reach out to all their supervisors, their team leads, especially, and I tell them, you will have a one-on-one conversation with every one of these guys. Most organizations don't do that. They basically will just shut off their access and kick them out of the door. Personally, I don't like that. Personally. So within my control, I tell them, you will have a one-on-one conversation. And the one-on-one conversation is, if it's a performance issue, your performance was not fantastic last year, and that's why we are exiting you. Because I believe everybody has value. The question is, how do we unlock the value? So you will find a place where your value will be recognized. So thank you for what you have done so far here. We appreciate your contributions and you can leave, right? It's that one-on-one conversation does a lot for the psychological or the mental health of the person you're talking to. If you kick them out without that, you basically are sending a message that they are useless. We all struggle when we are pushed out of a job where we are. A lot of us struggle the first few weeks or months or years and keep asking yourself, am I not good enough? Am
Tell
I
me
not
about it.
valuable? So that one-on-one conversation helps. Now, if you're done with that first level, the next level now becomes more difficult because all these now are people that are valued employees or high potentials, and they're doing quite a fantastic job. Or it's just that because now you're compressing the organization, you're restructuring, they have to leave. That process still continues. So the content of the conversation is then slightly different. The content of the conversation now is, listen, it's not because you are the worst performer. It's just because the restructure has eliminated your role, right? You have value. We recognize the value, but you need to leave for the business to survive. A lot of people don't like it when we say the business to survive, but whether we like it or not, the business is a living entity that must survive. If it does not survive, all of us are out of a job anyway, right? Yes. So we then have that conversation and the person leaves. Now, when you do that, that conversation percolates back to those that are still in the business. They see that you have a human face. They will continue to focus on their OKRs, that's objectives and key results, and their KPIs. But if you kick people out without having those conversations, without showing the human face, the guys remain and going to say, well, it could be me any day. So what's the point? I just start looking for another job. Or, well, whether I work hard and kill myself or not, they're going to kick me out anyway. So, right? It's a simple solution, but I've seen it work time and time and time again. And those ones that are that are leaving just because we are restructuring the business, I also tell them, the day we find the opportunity to get you back, you'll be the first that we'll reach out to. And I know some of them that had those kind of conversations with Baker Hughes that left are back in Baker Hughes today because I still follow that organization and they're doing excellent jobs. So that's very important.
Yeah. What you said just took me back to my own career.
Yes.
Crisis period, which was COVID. A lot of people lost their jobs at the time.
Yes.
And I was a lead in the organization, and we had a town hall meeting, and the CEO just, gathered everyone and said, this is what's going on. The CEO was so distraught, and at some point, I think he maybe was tearing up. But then he said, after this call, the people that are affected, you will realize that you're not able to log into your system again. I was so confident at the time. I thought, like, that can't be me. Like, I was just going to go straight to my business after the meeting, And after the call just ended, because it was remote work, I wanted to go back to my email, and I was like, please contact your administrator. You can't log in. And he just dawned on me like, oh my God, these people have actually, they've let me go. But the point that I'm trying to make is what you said, having a conversation. That was the first that they decided to do, to tell the general team. But as soon as I realized I could not log in, I immediately got a message from my line manager and the director of the organization. They wanted to have a meeting with me immediately. I wasn't the only one. Several other people, even VPs, had to go at the time. And so they got on a call to me to explain that. Said, Buki, this has nothing to do with your performance. You're great on the job. We would really love to keep you, but this is the situation with the financial aspect of the business. We can't keep everybody, and so we'll have to let you go. However, this is your severance package. You have health plan up till December. So I was still able to access healthcare till December, which was great. So having that conversation is important to let people know that it has nothing to do with your performance. But even if it has something to do with your performance, just like you said that you believe that there is a place for everybody. I cannot overemphasize how important it is to have that conversation, because when everybody goes, when the laptops are shut down, that's when the reality hits. Like, I do not, in fact, it's the next morning when you wake up. That's when it hits that I don't have a job anymore. So yeah, those conversations are really important.
Leadership is not easy.
It's not.
The question is, are you going to hide your head in the sand like the proverbial ostrich? Or are you going to step up, accept the fact that you are the leader and whatever decision you take could blow back in your face or could work?
Yeah.
That's what leadership is.
Yeah. Sometimes you never know your capabilities until you are put in the fire. That's when you know. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to move quickly to the last segment, which is the fireside chat. This is just going to be random questions that you can answer quickly. You can either answer with one word, or if you want to elaborate, feel free to do that. So when you're ready, you let me know.
I'm ready.
So in leadership, what matters the most? Clarity, consistency, or accountability?
Accountability first. I cannot tell people to do something that I cannot do myself, and I cannot tell people to do something that I am not accountable for the results.
Good. When scaling, what comes first? Systems, talent, or strategy?
Strategy first and systems next.
To stay competitive, what matters the most? Innovation, efficiency, or speed?
Efficiency. If I'm not efficient, I cannot be fast.
It's a good one. What is one book or resource that changed how you look at excellence in leadership?
I think it's also a book written by Jim Collins, How the Mighty Fall, which was a book that reviewed the fallout of the 2008 financial crisis.
Awesome. So, what is the best piece of leadership advice that you have ever received?
But the best piece of leadership advice I've ever received was from one of my mentors years ago, even before I dreamt of being a leader. This was in Enugu in eastern Nigeria. And he told me, he said, ensure that you personally connect with all your employees. The background to that was I was in his office and somebody came in and talked about an issue that he had in his family. And he opened this drawer and he gave the guy some money. So I asked him, I said, why did you do that? And he said, listen, he said, your people are human beings. They have families. The way they perform at work, this was a Chinese restaurant. I think it was the first Chinese restaurant in Enugu then. He said that the way they perform at work will be impacted by what they're dealing with at home.
Yes.
And then he said, even if you don't have money to give them, the fact that you sit down with them and you have a conversation and you either advise them or tell them, oh, I will be praying for you. He said that helps a lot. So my own leadership practice was I will get up from my desk and sometimes I just walk around the office. Because now his own industry was the food industry, my own was the engineering industry. There's a level of hierarchical behavior that I noticed in my own industry where people refused to come to my side of the building because I was the vice president, right? And I've seen somebody, I was walking on the corridor and the person saw me and said, MD is coming, and turned around. I told him, stop. So where are you going? He said, I cannot be walking on the same corridor with my managing director. And I said, okay, fine. If I leave this organization tomorrow and you see me on the street, I mean, I've left the organization, I don't work here anymore, and you see me on the street, will you call me your MD? And he said, no. I said, so what's different? So you're a human being, I'm a human being. So because of that, I then decided I will walk the corridors. I will go to workstations. I'll sit with people 5 minutes. How you doing? How's the family? How's your husband? How's your wife? What's happening with you? I give a level of advice, give a level of encouragement, and I move on. And that I learned from that very first conversation years before.
Fantastic, Ayobiyi. This has been an incredible masterclass. The biggest takeaway from me today is that operational excellence is not about being rigid. It's more about creating that stability that allows your team to be brilliant, even when the market is in chaos, maintaining the human connection, understanding your team, letting them know how they impact the organization, and leading from the perspective of a CEO. So thank you so much for being candid about the journey, the discipline that it takes to lead with both precision and purpose. And for our listeners, I hope that this gives you a new framework for how you look at your own systems and your own leadership. Before we let you go, where can people follow your work? How can they get in touch with BVI Consult?
We have a page on LinkedIn. I am also on LinkedIn as Ayobiyi. Currently, myself and my team, we're building a website for BVI Consult now. I have a personal website, ayoshote.com, so you can also connect with me there. From all these platforms, you can send me an email.
Fantastic. We'll make sure to add all of those in the show notes. To everybody listening, thank you so much for joining us. Bye.
Thank you.